So here's the information everybody wants. These are benchmark windows, and I want to clarify because I've highlighted some key details. In the fall, KM1 will have a separate screening window, so make sure you make note of that. That's going to be August 8th through the 21st. STAR for grades 2 through 10, you can see the 19th through the 30th. I highlighted dyslexia because that's our new screener. So after my presentation, if you look in the folder in the team drive, you'll see I've already uploaded this as a PDF file so that you can have access to all of these dates. The written expression screener we've given, we have changed the written expression window, so I want you to make note of that. The written expression, which is why I highlighted it in the winter, but dyslexia is new, so everybody's going to give that in the fall. If you have students who come in after the fall, you'll want to screen them as well. The optional window I want to point out is only for STAR 2 through 10. There's not an optional window for Ames Web Plus, so I want you to make note of that. For the winter, that's where I highlight the written expression screener, because if you remember, last year we did the written expression screener twice, but we did it in the fall and the spring. This year we moved it up to the winter. And then in the spring, you'll have the, if you'd like, to screen students who were in intervention. You can rescreen them in the spring, but we moved that up to the fall. And then if you notice here, the kindergartners take their dyslexia screener in the winter, so they're not included in that fall screening window. And then in the spring, there's the Ames Web Plus and the STAR. We've made that 4-week window we always give you at the end of the year so that everybody can kind of pick where in the window is appropriate for you to give the assessment, but we make it a 4-week window because we know there's a lot of testing at the end of the school year. And then if you have 10th graders, you do have the option to screen them in the spring if they're your tiered students. Okay, so just some facts on Ames Web Plus and Renaissance Place. The parent report for Ames Web Plus that we're going to send home for parents is called the SCORE Snapshot Report. Train teams, if you came to our summer training for Ames Web Plus, then you all will do the turnaround training in your buildings to give your students the reading and math probes. And then all team members may administer any probe, no matter the content, except for the phoneme segmentation piece. And then we do have our vetted resources. If you were at the training, you heard the presenter say, whenever you do intervention, you can no longer type in the name of the intervention, but there's a drop-down box. So we are going to upload our vetted resources to the drop-down, and you'll be able to choose from there. And then accounts and access, I think that's a popular question that I'm getting. When will our accounts be up and ready? Everybody has the Ames Web Plus icon currently on their dashboards, but the accounts are not set up yet. So our goal is to have everybody's account up and running by August 2nd, which is when everybody will be in the building, and so that your teachers can log in and everybody can get into their accounts. Okay, on the Renaissance side, if you've been joining us or if you joined us for our Renaissance training this summer, you heard the lady talk about how we are able to put SGP into the system, and it's going to pop up on your reports now. So for a classroom or a group that you set in Renaissance, at the bottom, you're going to see a percentage, and it's going to say like 80% of your students have reached the SGP. And that SGP for the system is going to be set at 35. Acceptable growth is between 35 and 65. So I set it at 35 so that we didn't have a lot of people's hair catching on fire and everybody was calling and emailing me. Okay. Schools must submit a Google form if you're going to request a student's test be deactivated. So the only time we deactivate a student's test is in case of an emergency. So like a student got sick maybe during the test and had to leave and go home. In the elementary schools, it happens more often where students come in and take the assessment on a Chromebook that somebody did not sign out of properly, and so then they took the test under somebody else's name. So things like that for deactivating tests. We're not deactivating tests because, you know, Bobby was just clicking, or Sally just felt like she wanted to stare at the screen and let the questions time out. So there's a Google form for that so we can track. If you came to the training, you also heard that the AR pass and quiz score can be controlled by the district now, and the system is no longer going to set that for us. So pass and score, I think she said it used to be 60%, so we're gonna raise ours to 70%. KM1 students will have access to AR even though they won't have STAR early literacy. So early literacy is going away in Renaissance, but if you have them for AR, they'll have seats. They can still have seats in there. I did put up here about your media specialists. We're giving them specific responsibilities now so that we can track who's changing and clicking and doing what in Renaissance. So if you remember, we had those logins that people were sharing, like, hey, take my login and you can do this, and take my login and you can do that. That's changing where Kelly's gonna set it up and everybody has a single sign-on click. So everybody has an individual account in Renaissance and we're not sharing passwords anymore. So your media specialist will be the only person in your building who can push out the actual product for your students to take the assessment. They are also the ones who will control the accommodation piece. So extended time and audio outside of the screening window, and then they are responsible for going back and turning that off. So I know you're like, who's gonna tell them that? Does my librarian know that? So we had a session only for librarians for the Renaissance training, and I've communicated that, but there were several people who were absent. So we're gonna make that training up on August 5th on the district-wide PD day, and they will get that information. And they're also going to be able to turn on and off that start password before you start a test, because a lot of people were saying, it takes us so long to go around the room and type that in. That's a building decision. So if you'd like to take that password off, your librarian can help you with that. And if you'd like to keep it on, they're the ones who can keep that password on. This is not the password like if someone has to go to the restroom or you're going to lunch and you pause the test and you come back. That's a different password, and Matt will speak about that. But this one is just to get a student to start the assessment period, and that's mostly in the elementary schools. Parents can now receive an email with student star scores, so instead of you sending those scores home with students, the parent can get an email notification with their star scores if you like. Neither Ames Web Plus nor Renaissance is supported on iPads, and the person who provides the intervention is responsible for progress monitoring. That's best practice, so I'll put that up there. Cut scores, minutes, and group sizes. I know this was like an exciting time for us last year. People were like, whoa, we get an extra seat at the table. So don't forget our new cut scores. Our tier 3 now will be 1 to 15. Tier 2 is 16 to 30. Remember, we gave you those blue students back. I'm giving them back to you, and now that I've done that, when I come in your buildings, guess what you guys are gonna be doing anyways? Working with those blue kids that you were having your hair on fire about, but it's okay. That's great, we're reaching all the kids. And then we have our proficient, 56 to 99. Okay, our minutes did not change, so I just kind of put them back in there, but I know it's going to take a while for everybody to remember our new percentages, so I just put that up there, 16 and 30. Our tier 2 minutes are remaining the same. Now, our ratios did change, so K5 is 1 to 6, and 612 is 1 to 8. That doesn't mean you have to put 6 people at the table. We're just giving you a 6th seat. So your kindergartner providers, bless their hearts, I really do not know how they do it with those little kindergartners at the table. You know, they may have 4 students at the table versus 6. But if you think your teacher can handle 6 kindergartners, then they may have 6 at the table for intervention for tier 2. Okay. Tier 3 minutes did not change. There's a total of 225 minutes the entire week, whether you get there by doing tier 2, tier 3 combined, or tier 3. However you get there, it is a 225 minute. And our ratios did change. So we gave you the flexibility of having 4 people at the table, because sometimes you had a group of 3 and then you were like, oh, we gotta start a whole new group just for 1 kid. So 1 to 4 for tier 3, and then 6 through 12 is 1 to 6. And then at the high school level, if you offer it for a credit, the ratio is 1 to 12. This is just a review about who provides intervention for tier 2, and then for tier 3, like your licensed teacher provides intervention for tier 2. Sometimes I get the question, like, what if a teacher's out and we have a substitute? My suggestion is leave something easy that the students could do. I wouldn't leave like phonics instruction for your sub to do unless they were like they used to be a teacher, but that's for sub purposes. And then I'd rather you combine and be at a ratio for tier 2 intervention versus counseling intervention altogether, and the kid's not getting anything. Your tier 3 provider is mostly your coaches, your interventionists in the building. At the high school level, we have RTI coordinators, so tier 3 providers. So Fidelity Checks, we had a change in Fidelity Checks, so I'm gonna go over that. I do have Q&A at the end, but I'm trying to meet my time. So Fidelity Checks are to be completed by administrators or school psychologists only, and we're asking you not to ask your coaches to complete those Fidelity Checks. So that has changed. There's no specific number tied to Fidelity Checks. So remember, we used to say you need, 3 and 5, informal, formal. There's no number tied to Fidelity Checks anymore. Instead, it's tied to how your students are performing in intervention. So anytime there's a new intervention group, there needs to be a Fidelity Check. So at the beginning of the school year, all of your teachers who are intervention providers will have a Fidelity Check. I will tell you that I'm going to try to start my RTI visits earlier so that when I come in, you know, I leave you with a little gift and I say, here are all the Fidelity checks I completed while I was here today. And so I will start those early. So first come, first serve for that. There's only one of me. There's a new intervention group. There needs to be a Fidelity check. So when you get ready to switch your groups, you switch in the provider. If you keep the same provider, if your students change, there needs to be a new Fidelity check. The forms are based on the area of deficit. So if you have a reading comprehension group, then you're going to have a reading comprehension Fidelity check. If you have a basic reading group, then you're going to have a basic reading Fidelity check. So those are very specific now. So make sure you're using the correct form. And then they're split elementary and secondary. So make sure you see that at the top of your form. If at any point a student begins to decline or flatline, there needs to be a Fidelity check so that we can figure out what's going on in their intervention, whether it be the product we're using, the provider, or the student. If all students are making appropriate gains, then there's no need to do a Fidelity check outside of the one you did your first time at the beginning of the year. That's the same for 2 and 3, and then all forms can be found on my Insight page. So don't go there now or tomorrow, or, you know, we'll be in here. So my Insight page is not updated yet, but by the time school starts back, all of the documents on Insight will be updated. Okay, do you remember? It was such a long time ago, so I just have to throw some stuff in there. Okay, the dyslexia screener is for grades K through 8, fall only. Remember, the kindergartners are going to come and take theirs in the winter. Written expression screener is 1 to 8. That's fall and winter only. So in the spring, you have the option. You have some flexibility with it. There are only 2 forms for RTI now, so forms A and B. And I don't know if you remember that, but I shared that before I left. We used to have A, B, C, D, and so we've cut it down to A and B. And then please do not use outdated RTI forms. So everything you get, please get it from my Insight page. And if they're not on my Insight page, that means you have the flexibility to edit. So some of you take attendance differently versus using like the official RTI attendance form that was put out, and that's fine. But for formality purposes, everything else off of Insight, use those forms. We have a list of approved vetted resources. I've shared that. New Fidelity checklist based on deficit. I talked about that. Your RTI parent letters may be sent home through Skyward. Intervention should begin as soon as possible with your rollover students. So your rollover students would be students who were receiving intervention last year, and at the end of the school year when you had that data team meeting, because I know you had it before you went home for the summer, those students that you discussed are the ones that can start immediately. And then you'll just add and readjust after the screening window, and you have to kind of move some people around. But your rollover students should start as soon as possible. High schools, remember, you'll need to track your students in the early warning system. That's the EWS, and if you have an RTI coordinator appointed to your building, I met with them before I left and shared the document, but you'll need to make a copy because it's locked, and so you won't be able to go in and make edits on my form. But EWS is how we track our high school students. We are moving to the K&1 Ames Web Plus screener and the Ames Web Plus progress monitoring for grades 2 and 5. And then if you want to use Renaissance Place for progress monitoring, like that's still an option. I know a lot of our SSS teachers like to use the Renaissance progress monitoring, so that still will be available for them.